You are now watching Believe. Do you believe?
We are Sally-less tonight. She's having a girls' night, I believe. I've asked for her prediction. I think she picked the Vikings, but she hasn't texted me back. When we get to our prediction segment, we'll have her chime in, hopefully. But we're going to unpack this upcoming Lions matchup. In the history of our show, which is a little over 2 years now, usually when the Lions come up, it's a pushover. However, all of a sudden, they are young and good, and their offense is as follows. They have scored the most touchdowns in the NFL. They have the best yards per rush. They've scored the second most points. They've gained the fourth most yards. And then between EPA per play on offense, they rank seventh in the league. And offensive DVOA, they rank eighth. So suddenly, through 2 weeks, just 2 games, they're it on offense. And it's like, wow, that came out of nowhere. So, Ron, these Vikings who played shitty defense on Monday, is this game going to be a shootout?
I wouldn't describe it as a potential shootout. Now the Lions, obviously, they're much improved. They're not, the Lions of old, because they do have some fight to them. They do have, they're building something there. But I say that in the sense that they're still in the process of building. Now, I'm not saying the Vikings are established and built, but I feel like we're ahead of them in the curve, kind of like it's always been for the last, 20 plus years. So, but now, kudos to them for, Jared Goff. He's playing with confidence, playing well. DeAndre Swift is a hell of a player. And Amon-Ra St. Brown, he's got that chip on his shoulder. So I would not bet against him, going forward, because he clearly is playing with that edge. And I like to see that out of a player. But the difference is it's at US Bank Stadium. We're at home. We're coming off of, laying a turd in Philly. Mm-hmm. The things that are being said post Philly, I'm liking what I'm hearing. Like, it's not, there's a lot of accountability there. It's not just blame one way or another. It's everyone had their play or had their finger in it. So I like that coming off of that game, going right into Detroit. So while I don't see it being a blowout win, I think the Vikings win handily. The Lions are going to get their points because they do have a good offensive line, a good running game, and a competent quarterback play. But I think the Vikings do find a way to pull ahead late, and it being, at least seeing them cover the, 6.5 that it's at right now.
Bryant, we've done this show multiple times for Lions Week, and I think the last time on the show I pulled the numbers, and when you were the left tackle for the Minnesota Vikings, they were 16-2 against Detroit. So, the dominance was there. Tell me your Lions memories, big man.
That was a game that we always just marked off as going to be a win. So it's like a little like funny now that this is a game that you aren't really sure how it'll go. Like, you know what I mean? Like, because it seems like both, their offense is doing pretty good. It seems like we got to see how our defense kind of adjusts to their offense. And then I don't know if their defense is too good, so our offense should, kind of be, hold up pretty decent against them. So I don't know. It's kind of like got to see now. And that's what I said, too, when I watched Detroit play the Eagles and how they played the Eagles. And even though it was at home for Detroit, I was just wondering, like, were the Eagles, like, just not as good, or has Detroit gotten better? And I do feel like Detroit has gotten better.
Yeah, they have indeed. The 2 times that they beat your Vikings were September 2007. So right away.
Adrian's rookie year.
Yep, Adrian's second game. And then I think your last game as a Viking, that was in Detroit in January of 2011. So right at the end of the 2010 season. I don't know if you remember that one.
Was that the after the dome collapse? Was that game?
That would have been probably about 2 or 3 weeks after it. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
Oh, that's right, because we played in Detroit.
Yeah.
That was it. What was it, the Giants or whatever? We played in Detroit. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Tuesday night football.
When Bryant talks about, we expected to win, it was correct. That's usually what happened. Will, you're a newcomer to the show. I'm going to ask you the shootout question. Do you believe in the stats and hype on the Lions offense versus this suddenly confusing Vikings defense?
I'm not quite there yet on the Lions. Last year and then moving into this year with their new coaching staff, especially their head coach and his machismo and his energy. I think it has picked the franchise up a little bit off the doormat. But I'm not sold yet. I think it's way too early in the season to be sold on a team that has been in the cellar for so long. I think their offensive line is real. I think their running game is real. I think Amon-Ra St. Brown is a problem. But I have no fear of Jared Goff. I think his numbers have been fine early in the season, but he hasn't played particularly well. If you watch their games, he's still got very many Jared Goff-esque throws that are just leaving much to be desired. So shootout, not quite. I think it'll be high-ish scoring. We can get into final scores at the end, but I actually have a very similar look as Ron. It'll be relatively closely contested. I think we'll pull ahead at the end. I do think we will cover the 6-point spread, which is actually kind of a large spread for this game, honestly. But I do think based on us getting the crap beat out of us on Monday, I think the energy, the excitement, the enthusiasm of the coaching staff and the team and the roster, I think that will carry through into this game. I think they're going to respond well. So I see the Vikings winning. I think it'll be high-ish scoring, but it's not going to be a shootout.
My homie in Germany, Janik Eckhart, who also writes for Vikings Territory, we created this quarterback machine that uses PFF, CPOA, or excuse me, the Ben Baldwin's analytic metric. I can never remember. EPA, CPOE, and DVOA. And Goff is playing to the clip of the 19th best quarterback in the league right now. So it's right now he's doing a somewhat wonderful job at game management while the rest of the offense is there. And yeah, their offensive line coming into the season was about top 6 by most credible ranking entities. So they're doing their job. The weapons are there, and Goff's doing just enough not to look foolish. The thing that confuses me about the Vikings defense is in the aftermath of this Eagles loss, some of the powers that be are saying like, well, yeah, we got to take away one aspect of their game. So if we become this poor run defense, at least we can have a secondary. And I'm looking at this roster and I see Zadarius Smith, Danielle Hunter, Dalvin Tomlinson, Harrison Phillips, Eric Kendricks, Patrick Peterson, Cameron Dantzler, Harrison Smith. And I'm like, why do we have to be a shitty defense? Like, I don't get it. I don't think we should like throw in any type of flags that says, all right, we know we're not going to be good, so we're just going to allow 6 yards for carry and hope for the best, taking away the big play. Like, there's got to be a defensive coordinator on the planet that can make these guys good. And so I'm not quite thinking that we need to write the obituary on the defense. I think they tried something funky against the Eagles, and it was like this buzzsaw phenomenon. So we'll get more proof in the pudding against the Lions.
And to that point too, it's like, yeah, there's a bunch of names out there that are established vets that have been productive. Now, again, if looking at Monday's game, to me, that was 100% scheme. Like they played scared. Like they didn't want to rush too hard and then let Jalen Hurts beat them with his legs. So they gave him the time to throw it, and he picked them apart. Why there was no, press at the line. I get AJ Brown is a monster. He's one of the most physical receivers in the league. So you're not going to jam him up, but you can't let him get to a spot uncontested. Like that's like, not saying he's Randy Moss, but Randy Moss, if you let him just run, he's running by you. Like, even if you have 2 guys on it, he's going to run by you. You got to disrupt that early. And fortunately for the Lions, or at least for the Vikings case for the Lions, yes, Amon-Ra St. Brown is a hell of a player. He's very physical as well. But DJ Chark doesn't scare me. Josh Reynolds, while he's a quality slot receiver, he doesn't scare me. TJ Hawkinson's good in the middle of the field, but they don't have the weapons outside all around that the Eagles have, and they especially don't have that scrambling quarterback aspect. So if to your point, Dustin, I don't want it to be just take one or the other, because yes, it's like DeAndre Swift, he is problematic because he's very shifty, very elusive. But one thing I've noticed in watching him, he doesn't like contact. Like if you start to hit him, then he's going to angle to the sidelines and out of bounds all the time. I think Hard Knocks actually kind of really exposed that with Deuce Staley yelling at him. Like, I want you to go inside, like all this. But he, in his whole career, seems scared of contact. I don't know if it's injury or what, but you can get some hits on him. Hopefully Lewis Seen gets some playing time, and not taking cheap shots, but give him a pounding. He's not a big guy. They just play football, see what happens, but don't play scared, don't play soft.
I think that, I think that's it, because I refuse to just think, oh, well, they're not going to be good. Like, they got the guys to be good. Bryant, one of the things that's been odd so far is that Dalvin Cook and Adam Thielen have been kind of minimized in terms of their role. So would you think that that's more of a learning curve inside of a new offense, or is this like an age, like they're starting to slow down type of ordeal?
Maybe a learning curve, just really getting familiar with the offense, and then they should become a little more productive, probably like week 4 or 5, if anything. But they need to kind of get them more productive like right away. And that way you can't, it's not just strictly a passing situation. It's like you be able to run the ball, as well.
Yeah, that was an oddity. Cousins was the leading rusher on Monday night, and they only ran the ball a handful of times, which is very weird. In any Vikings game under any coach.
They were behind too. So when you're on the road and you're behind a lot, they try to pass a lot more though. But they got behind early, so I still felt like they had a fair chance to kind of run the ball a little bit and see how, what type of success they would have running the ball. But I do know coaches always feel like when you're on the road and you're behind, you're going to throw.
Yeah. Will, so Adam Thielen through quarters 1 through 3 in games 1 and 2. So first 3 quarters of the first 2 games, he's only been targeted 3 times, and they got him involved during pure garbage time. And he ended up leading the team in receiving. I doubt anybody was like, oh, look at this badass, he did well. So between he and Cook, is it your opinion that these guys are getting used to this, or O'Connell's getting used to them, or do we need to be worried about age-related declines?
I have a different take on both of them. So with Cook, I'll keep it short. I'm not worried. I actually thought he looked like he had a burst in week 1. I think week 2 was kind of like what Brian said. It's just the circumstances dictated throwing the ball. And so when you get behind and you have 3 and outs in the first half and you barely have the ball, you don't really have a chance to establish a running game. So I don't really have a worry about Dalvin Cook, frankly, at this point in the season. With Adam Thielen, he looks a little slow. Bryant, you would know more about getting players involved in a new scheme and getting comfortable there. But from my perspective, what I'm seeing right now is it doesn't feel like he's getting separation. He looks a little bit slower than he has been in the past. The thing that I do like with Thielen moving forward, and even if he kind of slides sort of back into the wide receiver 3 role, is he is sort of a Kirk Cousins security blanket. And even if he only gets 3 receptions a game, he can still have an impact on the team. So I'm not so much worried about his ability to impact the game. I think just looking at what I'm seeing so far, though, I think it might be age and a little bit of decline.
And he is 32. So, it's around the age where that could theoretically happen. But the weird part, not about what you said, but the broader context is he is the security blanket, and we've needed some damn security here, especially against the Eagles. Yeah. And he didn't start trying to find him until the game was meaningless. So I would expect, I think I was it Josh Fry today, who said that he predicted 2 touchdowns for Thielen against the Lions because he refused to believe that all of a sudden they just lost a step and this ain't going to work anymore. And I've spent the better part of 2 days trying to figure out if this is Thielen not being able to get open suddenly for a weird reason, or if he's just been a footnote based on how a non-Zimmer offense ticks, which would be very odd.
Yeah. So one little thought on that, Dustin. I think it's an interesting point, and honestly kind of goes back to my thought about Cook and just the lack of usage is that, so week 1, Jefferson was wide open all game.
Yeah,
so
that's what
you're going to throw him the ball.
Josh said too.
You're going to throw him the ball. Who cares about everybody else?
And that's why we didn't talk about this last week. We didn't care.
Yeah, like week 2 though, you get these 3 and outs, and the game plan sort of goes haywire. So in some ways, there's not a whole lot to be made at this point about his targets, but I think there's something to read into it. But I don't want to read too much into, 2 sort of weird games that maybe played out differently than we thought.
2 games that had like the identical score, but flipped in
Yeah.
so very different directions. Ron, give me your Cook Thielen spiel.
So, I mean, yes, I think it's natural that with Thielen, you're going to see some sort of a decline as far as athleticism goes. But I still think he's one of the best number 2 receivers in the NFL. He could still be a number 1 on a lot of teams. So while he may not have the straight line speed, he's definitely got that short area quickness to be a slot receiver. So I'm not worried about him. Dalvin, yes, like Will said, I saw a lot of bursts there against the Packers. He's just his first cut, his instincts, they were all there. I will say this, and I'm not dogging on him at all, but the first part of the game, he looked very disinterested to me. He dropped a couple passes. Like there was just, it wasn't just him. There were a few players that just didn't seem like they came out ready to play. And I think combine that with a lack of opportunities, because I know whether it's running back or offensive line, they want to get those opportunities. They want to get in that rhythm. It's like getting a jump shooter to the free throw line to see the first one go in and then, getting a rhythm from there. So having 6 rushes, I'm not concerned about that. I think it's just, like you said, the way the game went. So Dalvin does not discourage me. He'll come back. The Lions defense also does not scare me. The 2 defenses we played previously are good defenses. We have to give them credit. Even
we
Packers,
said that too 3 weeks ago. We said this.
Yeah. So even with the Packers, yes, I know Alexander, whether or not he was matched up with Jefferson or not, that means that if he's not on Jefferson, he's likely on Thielen. So that's a tough matchup. James Bradbury and obviously Slay, who locked down Jefferson. That's a tough matchup. This week, Amari Aruarie, whatever his name is, he doesn't scare me. Jeffrey Okudah, he doesn't scare me. So Cousins always seems to have very good games against Detroit, whether it's here or in Detroit. I expect to see that again. I expect to see Thielen, I don't know about the 2 touchdowns, but he's going to have, a 5-6 reception game, likely an opportunity to score. But I think, I wouldn't be concerned about those guys going into this game. And I'm actually hoping that Aiden Hutchinson plays, because I want to see our offensive line continue to get tested week in, week out. I want to see Darrisaw's development against the best players that he's going to see. Well, again, if he misses time, obviously that's a huge advantage, because he had 3 sacks in the first half.
So the headline you'll hear about the Lions defense is that Aiden Hutchinson had those 3 sacks, which is lovely, good for him. But on the whole, per defensive EPA per play, they are the 3rd worst defensive club through 2 weeks. So they have been winning because of offense and nothing to do with defense. Bryant, in week 1, the Vikings took care of business and then equally kind of wet the bed against Philadelphia. So are you panicked at all going into this Lions game, or describe your panic meter, if any?
No, I'm not panicked. A lot of teams, when they lose and they come back and they try to regroup and they want to get that feeling of the loss out. So I think a lot of those guys on that team have the same feeling I have. It's like Detroit, it should be a team that we should beat. Mm-hmm. And even if Detroit is playing at a high level, I do think they're capable of raising their level and still getting a win with Detroit, because it's at home, correct?
Yes.
Right. So I think they should be able to pull that off at home.
After a loss like that, do you go in the locker room, or other players go in and say, man, that shit was bad, or, talk about it? Or is it just unspoken, moving on? Like, do you get fired up?
The fact that it was a Monday night game, it's more of a move on thing, because you don't have Monday to come and watch film. So it's like you're off on Tuesday and you're right now to the next game. So for them, they didn't really get a chance to see a lot of their mistakes. So at this point, you just got to kind of just shake that off and just now focus. You're on to Detroit, so you come back. You can't even dwell on that game because it was a Monday night game. You don't have no time to revisit it.
Okay. Also, on a game like that, when it is a Monday night, obviously the team travels home right away. Is that usually so you don't have that time? It's not like a 3:00 game or game end or whatever, and everyone's awake, ready to go home or whatnot, and you're kind of maybe chatting about it. People are probably trying to sleep, relax, or whatever. Is there any discussion internally on the plane about how poorly it went, and or at that point everyone's just going to distance themselves?
When they're playing by, a lot of coaches are watching it on their little laptops, and they're going through the games during the course of their ride back, and they're really looking at what took place. So as far as coaches and players, there's no real conversation. Players are probably just interacting and talking about plays made or they didn't make during it. But as far as coaches, I always see them on their laptops and their or their iPads or whatever, and they're watching the game.
Okay. All right, Will, describe, if any, your panic meter heading into week 3.
Because they grade you too, so they're probably grading you.
Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah.
My panic meter is very low.
Okay.
I think I was on my Load the Box show an hour ago, and Jordan Hawthorne, my co-host, asked me the same question, and I put it on a scale of 1 to 10. I gave it a 3. Bad game on Monday, but I think we'll flush it. I think there's enough pride in the locker room to flush it and move on. I also saw us being 1-1 at this point.
Yeah, we always forget that.
Just because we lost in a bad way, it doesn't mean that, all of a sudden it counts as 2 losses. It's still 1. It doesn't matter by how much you lose. So it was a horrible game. It's one to forget. There's a lot of things to clean up, but I also think a new coaching staff with a lot of, eagerness to show what they're made of, I think they're going to rebound well. And along with obviously the team. So I'm not terribly concerned. If you talk to me on Sunday afternoon and we got our heads beat in by Detroit, then it's a different story. But where we sit today, I'm not really that worried.
My panic is only on the defensive side of the ball, and it's kind of to my speech 10 minutes ago that I don't want to be a part of a community for a team that's if it's going to be like it was when I was a teenager, where nobody tackles and every game feels like it has 37 points. Oh, I don't know. Maybe I got spoiled with the way Zimmer coached, and that for the most part, the defense was somewhat competent and for 6 years, damn good. So I hated to see that is in their DNA somewhere, and that it could rear its ugly head if they were actually good and they got to the playoffs. I hate to have that game out there now in my memory bank, but this is the way it goes. We talked about the precedent for Super Bowl winning teams. 3 of the last 4 have got their asses beat by 17 or more points. The 2021 Rams, the 2020 Bucks, courtesy of the Saints, and then the 2018 Patriots got smoked by the Titans before they went and won a Super Bowl. So my panic meter is only because I guess I didn't think we'd see a stinker this early. Ron, tell us about yours, if any.
Yeah, I mean, mine, right around Will's, 3, maybe even less, because again, like I said, going into the year, this was one of those games that I had us as a loss. Even in my 4-2, 5-1 into the bye type prediction, this was one that I didn't see that we had a great chance to win. Now, obviously, as the game got closer, I was like, hey, we have a shot. But even Monday night approached, my confidence was waning. So, yeah, I'm not worried about it at all. Now, again, to your point, if the Lions go out and they kick our ass, that's a different story.
At home.
But it's also exactly.
Mm-hmm.
But I also look at it from the standpoint, and Brian, you can say whether or not like this is right or wrong, but you go out and you get your ass kicked. Sometimes in my mind, it's a lot easier to turn the page than it is if there's one play that was left on the board, because here it's like, we did nothing right. Let's move on to the next game. But if there's one play or a fumble or a turnover, in our case, a missed field goal, there's a lot that you may be thinking about rather than moving on, turning the page, moving on, that you're going to, be thinking about the past. So, Brian, do you have any thoughts on that? Like, is it, as a player, is it better to just move on from, just getting taken behind the woodshed, or would you rather lose a close game and be able to come back and prove yourself again?
Well, you have to move on from a loss. You can't dwell on that. But so wait, what is the question?
Like, is it easier to move on, like, from a game where you just dominated, or a game that was a close one that, you lost on like a last second, or, one play decided it?
It was definitely easier to move on from a game that you dominated.
No, you got dominated.
Right.
Oh, got dominated?
Yeah. Is it easier to lose by 20 or by 2?
It was probably easier. That was probably easier to move on from a game that you got dominated, though, because like a close game, you're just thinking about the small things at that point that would have made a difference. Like if the person would have made that extra point, just like little small minute things, like the penalty, like little penalty, like
Right.
little things that drive you crazy, and you'll look at it and be like, if we just did this and we just did that, like we could have won. So yeah, but if you got dominated,
and that's what I was alluding to in the sense that I feel like it's harder to move on knowing that you let one get away. But if you didn't have a shot in it at all, then it's like, you know what, wasn't our night. Let's go.
Yeah, it's kind of like Ron, why it's easier. Why 1998 lives in our memory more so than 2017, like because it was within our salivating grasps. And in 2017, you were there. We just got our faces kicked in, and that was that.
And 01, dude, too, for the 41 donut for that matter.
Like, yeah, that was even more egregious.
I completely forget about that game, that being the NFC Championship.
Yeah. All right, so Sally has texted in. She's picking the Lions. She didn't give a score, but she must be, I don't know if it's easier to do via text message, but her optimism has evidently dipped a little bit. I think the Vikings will win this somewhat handily, 34-17, mainly because I think they're going to find relief in a defense that's not very good. You're going to get to see the offense get back on track. And the thing that concerned me about the defense is that they thought that would be a good plan against the Eagles in the first half. Whatever they thought, they could never do that again because that was mind-boggling.
But I wonder, like, why they didn't make any good halftime adjustment. Well, maybe they kind of did.
On defense, they did. Nobody ever scored again in the game, right. And the special teams and defense gave the Vikings a few chances to nibble their way back in. But then, of course, the offense was like, nah, no thanks, we're not doing this. But I say 34-17 and a somewhat convincing win to get back on track. Bryant, Vikings or Lions?
I'm going to say the Vikings, and I'll say the score will be like 28-21.
My goodness.
I do think it'll be like somewhat of a high-scoring game because I feel like both offenses I feel like Detroit's defense isn't like the most dominant, so I feel like we could put up some points. But I do feel like the Detroit has a fairly decent offense, so they'll put up points as well.
All right, so Vikings in a squeaker, according to B-Mac. Will, what do you got? Put it on record.
I got Vikings 33-21. I think it will be close-ish, and I think we will score at the end to make it a double-digit win. I think it'll be competitive. I don't think Detroit lies down, but I think the defense, like you said, Dustin, will step up a little bit. I think Eric Kendricks has a big impact on this game. We haven't really had many Eric Kendricks sightings yet, so I'd like to see that. But yeah, relatively close game. Minnesota pulls at the end, 33-21.
Ron, hit us with your score prediction. I'm pretty sure you're taking the purple.
Yep. So I got the Vikings, and pretty similar to where we're all at. I got it 31-20. I think, Will just mentioned as well, I think it'll be pretty close, but I think the Vikings will get a score late that will essentially ice it. And I don't think we have to worry about what we had to deal with at the US Bank Stadium last year with the Lions.
Oh, God.
That's the ultimate fear. So, but yeah, I think, I think Kirk's going to come out and have 3 touchdowns, no picks. And I think Dalvin's going to get in the end zone as well. So, we'll see. Hopefully, our special teams continues to. They haven't been an issue at all.
Yeah, the lone bright spot.
Nice
yeah,
yep.
A consistent bright spot, I should say.
But I just want to see. I just want to see some more pressure out of the defense. Like they have the talent. Again, if they're healthy with Smith and Hunter, there's no reason that this can't be. A top half of the league in as far as defense is concerned. But I want to see some pressure. And it's a tough O-line. I mean, from Taylor Decker, Sewell, they're going to be tough. Ragnow in the middle. So this will be a good test because the Eagles also have a really good offensive line. But let's just scheme something up that's a little different. 3-4 is supposed to generate pressure and disguises. Monday, we did not see that.
All right. Will, thanks for joining us, sir. Where can we find you on the internet?
You can find me on the internet in a couple different places. Dustin Baker's VikingsTerritory.com, one of his staff writers. Also, under the Vikings Territory umbrella is my Load the Box podcast, co-hosted with Jordan Hawthorne. And then lastly, on Twitter at Will Bad Lose.
Excellent. All right, Ron, Bryant, and then Sally will be back on Monday night to discuss the Lions-Vikings game, and we'll chat for about 20 minutes in a post-game capacity. Anything else, gentlemen?
That's it.
All right. Skol, baby. Talk to you next week.
All right. Have a good one.
Later.
Cheers, guys.